So picture this. You're standing at the edge of a high dive. Below you is just this packed auditorium. You step up to the microphone, you clear your throat, and you start speaking.
And that's usually when the panic sets in.
Right, because within like 20 seconds you notice it, the subtle collective drop of heads. You start seeing the blue glow of phone screens lighting up faces in the back rows.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
It really is.
Yeah.
The glassy-eyed stares. I mean, it is the ultimate speaker's nightmare, right? Just losing the room before you even really start.
And it triggers this massive physiological response for the speaker, too. Your heart rate spikes. You start rushing your words, just trying to fill the silence, which honestly only makes the audience disengage even further.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
We've all felt that terror, or at least, the fear of it, whether you're keynoting a major conference or just like trying to get through a Tuesday morning team update.
But what if bombing on stage has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of natural charisma? What if it's literally just a lack of architecture? Today, we are opening up the playbooks of two absolute masters of the craft to figure out how to prevent that exact nightmare for you.
Exactly. We've got a really great deep dive planned here.
Yeah, we're looking at a fascinating breakdown from world champion speaker Darren LaCroix, and we're pairing that with Akash Kuria's intensely practical book, How to Deliver a Great TED Talk. They both basically argue that keeping a room hanging on your every word, it's a highly learnable framework.
It absolutely is. I mean, it relies on very specific structural formulas, psychological hooks that hijack human attention, and a rather uncomfortable amount of self-reflection.
Right, it's not just magic.
No, not at all. You don't need to be born with a silver tongue to build a presentation that people literally cannot forget. You really just have to understand how human memory works.
Which is so empowering.
Yeah.
But to build that architecture, you obviously can't start by just opening PowerPoint and picking a font. You have to know what you're actually trying to say.
Yes. The message.
And the sources highlight this story about Darren LaCroix that proves how incredibly difficult that first step really is. So he was prepping for the World Championship of Public Speaking, literally the biggest stage possible in his field. He had the energy, he had dozens of funny stories, but he was completely paralyzed.
Because he didn't have a central point.
Right, exactly.
He had what we call a brain dump. A lot of speakers do this. They just compile everything they know about a topic into one giant document.
Oh, I've definitely done that.
We all have. But his coach, Mark Brown, gave him an exercise that forces you to bypass all that noise. It's the die tomorrow question.
Oh, right. This is intense.
It is. Brown told Darren to picture a child he loved dearly. So his nephew, in this case, sitting right there in the fourth row of the empty auditorium. And then he asked him, if you were to die tomorrow, what is the single life lesson you would choose to leave with that child?
Wow. I mean, that completely shifts the stakes.
Right. Suddenly you aren't thinking about, sounding smart or making sure you hit every bullet point on some project update. You're searching for actual resonance.
Because it just completely cuts out the ego.
Exactly. It's an exercise in what the sources call forced prioritization. When you remove the luxury of time or the luxury of just having a captive audience, you have to find the absolute bedrock of your message.
Right.
Think about political campaigns. They are notorious for overcomplicating things. Back in 1992, Bill Clinton's team was dealing with foreign policy, healthcare, national security, just a dizzying array of vital issues. But they used forced prioritization to drill all of that down to one internal compass. And obviously, we're just reporting on the communication strategy here, not taking any political sides. But that phrase was, it's the economy, stupid.
Right. It became iconic just structurally. But let me push back on that a little bit, though.
Go for it.
If I'm, say, an engineer trying to explain a highly complex new software architecture to a board of directors, doesn't forcing my entire presentation down to one single sentence run the risk of just dumbing down the material? I mean, you can't fit a complex system into a bumper sticker.
Yeah, that's a completely valid fear. But forced prioritization isn't about dumbing down the intelligence of the content, it's about stripping away the non-essentials.
Okay, how so?
Well, the author points out that you might have 3 fascinating side tangents or incredibly detailed data sets, but if they don't serve that one core message, they are actually distracting your audience.
Oh, I see.
That single sentence becomes the filter. Every slide, every story, every statistic, they all must pass through that filter to justify their place in the room.
Okay, so the core message is your internal filter. It keeps you, the speaker, from going off the rails.
Exactly.
But Korea's book draws a massive distinction between that internal core message and what he calls a power phrase.
Yes. This is crucial. The core message is for you. The power phrase is strictly for the audience. It's a catchy, repeatable sentence, ideally under 10 words, that is engineered to stick in the listener's brain long after the presentation ends.
It's the mental earworm.
Yes.
Like a commercial jingle. If the core message is the destination you're driving toward, the power phrase is the song stuck in the audience's head when they ride along. If it has a rhythm, their brains will just keep playing it on a loop whether they want to or not.
That's the exact mechanism. And to understand why that works, Korea references the successors principles.
Right, from the Heath brothers.
Right, Chip and Dan Heath. They developed this framework to explain why certain ideas survive while others die. For our purposes, let's just focus on the S and the U. A sticky idea needs to be simple, and it needs to be unexpected.
So a power phrase has to be radically simple, but also have that linguistic hook.
Exactly, something unexpected to the ear.
And the book breaks down the rhetorical tools to build those hooks. One of them is rhyme, which sounds almost too basic, but the 2012 Toastmasters winner, Ryan Avery, used the phrase, "East is a must."
Yeah.
It's so incredibly simple, but the rhyme acts like superglue for human memory. Or you can use contrast and a technique called chiasmus.
Chiasmus is a brilliant tool. It's essentially a structural reversal. You take a phrase and then literally flip the grammatical structure in the second half.
The classic example they use is Ronald Reagan's line about the Cold War. And again, just looking at the rhetoric here, he didn't just say, "We have weapons because we don't trust them."
Right, that would be forgettable.
Yeah, instead he used chiasmus. He said, "We don't mistrust each other because we're armed. We're armed because we mistrust each other."
When you hear a reversal like that, it breaks your brain's predictive text.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, you expect a sentence to end one way, and when the structure flips, it forces your brain to actively process the contrast. It feels profound because it requires a tiny bit of cognitive puzzle solving. And when your audience solves that puzzle, the phrase locks into their memory.
Okay, so we have the mental earworm. But a 10-word phrase isn't speech. I mean, if you just stand up and repeat, "East is a must" for 20 minutes, security is going to escort you out of the building.
Hopefully, yeah.
You need a delivery vehicle. You need architecture.
Which is where the ABCC formula comes into play. It's a structural backbone. It stands for an attention-grabbing opening, a body, a conclusion, and a clear call to action.
Let's focus heavily on the A, that attention-grabbing opening, because I think this is where most of us completely sabotage ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
The psychology here revolves around the primacy effect. Human brains are fundamentally wired to heavily remember the very first things we hear in a sequence.
From a cognitive standpoint, when a speaker first walks on stage, the audience's attention is at its absolute peak. They are assessing you, deciding if you are a threat, deciding if you are interesting. Dollar for dollar, those first 30 to 60 seconds are the most valuable real estate in your entire presentation.
The 30-second rule.
Yes.
And yet, Korea's book points out 3 incredibly common ways we completely light that real estate on fire. The first is the me-focused opening rambling about how bad traffic was, or, just reading off your own bio.
Bit boring.
Right. The second is the forced, awkward joke that has nothing to do with the topic, which just creates this agonizing dead air.
We've all cringed through that.
But the third mistake is the one that really challenged me, is starting with a standard, "Thank you for having me."
It's easily the most common opening in the corporate world.
But wait, let's look at the reality of being a professional. If a client or an organizer brings you in to speak, isn't thanking them just basic, required politeness? Skipping that feels almost arrogant.
It feels polite to you, the speaker, but think about the audience's experience. Because the primacy effect, you have their maximum brain power for exactly half a minute. If you spend that window on housekeeping, thank you to the audio team, thank you to the organizers, I'm so happy to be in Cleveland.
Right.
You are squandering their peak focus on administrative data. The brain instantly categorizes the speech as routine and just starts to tune out. You can absolutely weave your gratitude in 3 or 4 minutes later, but you must own those first 30 seconds to hook them immediately.
Okay, so if we aren't saying thank you, we need to trigger a reaction. The sources outline 5 opening gambits to do this. You can launch straight into a story, dropping them right into the action. You can ask a question. You can use a quotation or a callback to something that happened earlier in the event.
Yeah.
But the most aggressive one is a startling statement.
The startling statement works precisely because it shatters pattern recognition. If the audience expects you to say, let's look at Q3 earnings, and instead you open with, within 5 years, half the roles in this department will be entirely automated.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would wake me up.
Right. You trigger a mild threat response in their brains. Their amygdala flares up just enough to guarantee absolute unbroken focus.
You grab them by the collar with that startling statement.
Ugh.
But a shock tactic only buys you a few minutes. Now you have to justify why they should give you the next hour of their lives. You have to pivot from the gambit to what the text calls the big promise.
The big promise is the transaction. You are explicitly telling them what they get in exchange for their attention.
So by the end of this session, you will shave years off your learning curve.
Exactly. And the author mentions the EDGE benefits for a big promises scheme, dividends, gladness, escape. Basically, what emotional or practical reward are they getting?
And the brilliant counterweight to the big promise is the pain statement. Human behavior is driven by two things: gaining pleasure or avoiding pain. And neurologically, avoiding pain is almost always the stronger motivator.
Loss aversion is a powerful thing.
It is, but using pain is tricky. If you are a motivational speaker talking about overcoming a personal tragedy, well, pain is built into the narrative. But how do you use a pain statement if you're explaining tax law or software compliance?
Right, it seems impossible.
But Korea's book shares this perfect example of a lawyer named Nick.
Oh, the banking legislation story?
Yes. Nick had to explain new, incredibly dry banking legislation to a room full of bankers who viewed this as a mandatory check-the-box seminar. They did not want to be there.
If Nick started by listing compliance codes, they would have mentally checked out immediately. So instead, he used an implicit pain statement. He opened with a story about a very competent banker who ended up going to federal prison over a tiny, easily preventable clerical error.
Instant panic in the room.
Exactly.
Suddenly, every single banker is sitting up straight thinking, wait, could I go to jail for a clerical error? I better listen to Nick. It is masterfully manipulative in the best way.
It really is.
You hook them with the pain, you promise them the solution, and then, crucially, you have to give them a roadmap.
A roadmap is the structural outline of your talk delivered up front. The absolute masterclass in this is Steve Jobs' famous commencement address at Stanford. He walked up to the podium and didn't give a grand philosophical intro. He just said, "Today I want to tell you 3 stories from my life." That's it. No big deal, just 3 stories.
Why is that so deeply effective for memory? It's because a roadmap creates what the author calls mental folders. When Jobs says 3 stories, every person in that audience unconsciously opens 3 empty file folders in their working memory.
Right.
When he finishes story 1, they file it away and anticipate story 2. It organizes the data for them.
It completely removes the audience's cognitive load. They don't have to spend mental energy trying to figure out where you're going or wondering when the speech will end. They feel safe in the structure, so they can just sit back and actually absorb the content.
Okay, let's look at where we are. We have an internal core message. We have a sticky power phrase. We shattered their expectations with an opening gambit, promised them a solution to their pain, and handed them a mental roadmap.
The architecture is bulletproof.
It is. So now we enter the final phase, the delivery. How do we make the actual performance unforgettable?
This requires shifting from structure to psychological engagement. One of the primary tools the sources highlight is the use of rhetorical questions.
But not just asking questions for the sake of it, turning the presentation into a mirror.
Precisely. Instead of telling the audience a fact, you force them to generate the fact themselves. Going back to Ronald Reagan, he didn't just declare the economy was worse 4 years ago. He asked the crowd, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" Or motivational speaker Zig Ziglar asking, "Are you a wandering generality or a meaningful specific?"
When you ask a question like that, the listener literally cannot stop themselves from answering it internally. They have to assess their own life against your message.
Exactly.
And as you guide them through these realizations, Korea notes that you have to anchor your main points. I know there are like 10 different anchors he mentions, things like using anecdotes, analogies, or physical activities.
Yeah, quotes, humor.
Right. And to make those stories work, especially anecdotes, he talks about the VAKS formula.
Ah, yes. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, smell.
You have to build sensory storytelling. But the holy grail of delivery, beyond just a good story, is what they call the wow moment.
A wow moment ties back to the concrete and unexpected success principles we mentioned earlier. It is the physical manifestation of your concept. It's when a speaker does something so visually arresting that it burns into the hippocampus permanently.
The ultimate example from the text is Bill Gates at a TED conference. He's talking about the massive, abstract problem of malaria. Statistics about malaria are tragic, but they don't necessarily grab a wealthy audience in a comfortable conference center.
Right.
So to make it visceral, Gates literally opens a glass jar and releases live mosquitoes into the auditorium.
Which is insane.
I know. He just says, there's no reason only poor people should have the experience.
It's brilliant. The sudden physical reality of the mosquitoes completely collapses the distance between the audience and the problem. No one in that room ever forgot that speech. Oh, and Jill Bolt, too.
Oh, yes. The brain researcher.
Right. She actually brought a real human brain out onto the TED stage to explain her stroke, just holding it in her hands with the spinal cord hanging down.
So concrete. So unexpected.
Absolutely unforgettable.
But here is the piece of the puzzle that I think completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. We usually assume that to command a room like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, you need impenetrable armor. You need a flawless resume, and you need the person introducing you to list all your awards so the audience respects you.
Right, external credibility.
Yes, but the sources reveal that to build true internal credibility, you shouldn't lead with your successes. You have to lead with your catastrophic failures.
It is a profound shift. External credibility is your resume. It gets you in the door. But internal credibility is built on the stage. If you only project perfection, you create a massive psychological distance. The audience thinks, well, of course you succeeded. You're a genius. Your advice won't work for me.
Right.
But when you share your struggles, you build a bridge of shared humanity.
Darryl LaCroix's journey to his world championship win perfectly illustrates this. When his coach forced him to find his core message, which ended up being about taking risks and failing, he realized he had to share his most embarrassing failure.
The sandwich shop.
Yes. Darren had bought a Subway sandwich shop. And he tells the audience, I don't want to brag, but in 6 short months, I took a $60,000 debt and I doubled it.
That's hilarious.
He jokes that he turned a Subway franchise into a non-profit organization. I mean, he financially fell flat on his face.
The audience laughs, yes. But look at the psychological mechanism at play there. By acknowledging his deepest flaw, by addressing the elephant in the room that he isn't perfect, he completely disarms their skepticism. His later success as a speaker is now earned in their eyes, not assumed.
Raw vulnerability actually creates significantly more credibility than a polished LinkedIn profile. The audience thinks, if this guy can fail that spectacularly and still recover, I really need to listen to his roadmap.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the final and maybe most intense concept from Darren LaCroix, the pursuit of the 11.
Right. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you push a presentation to an 11? How do you ensure you don't just blend in with every other highly competent speaker?
Darren realized that in the motivational speaking world, everyone uses the exact same metaphors. Everyone talks about falling down in life and having the courage to get back up,
Right.
but no one actually did it on stage.
No, it's always just a figure of speech.
Right. So pulling from his background in physical comedy, Darren decided that during his world championship speech, in front of thousands of people and judges, he was going to literally, physically fall flat on his face on the stage.
And just stay down.
Yeah, and stay down while he spoke.
He took a tired verbal metaphor and made it uncomfortably, undeniably physical, and it was a massive risk. His coach warned him, Darren, you may win by it, you may lose by it, but you will stand out.
And it wasn't just a cheap stunt. He visually linked his comedic failure, his literal fall, directly to his core message of failing in his sandwich business. The physical action was the wow moment for his message. That was his 11.
And it secured him the world championship because he dared to be that vulnerable simultaneously, emotionally, and physically.
So let's pull all these threads together. If you want to craft a presentation that fundamentally changes a room, you don't start by picking out templates. You start by finding your absolute core message, asking yourself, what single lesson you'd leave behind if you died tomorrow?
Right.
You forge that into a sticky, unexpected power phrase. You build the ABCC architecture, leveraging the primacy effect by hooking them instantly with a startling statement, offering a big promise, and handing them a roadmap so their brains can organize the data.
Mental folders.
Exactly. And finally, you anchor that delivery with deep vulnerability.
Which brings us to a final thought to leave you with, something to chew on long after this deep dive ends. We spend so much of our professional lives meticulously curating our successes. We polish our resumes, we filter our social media, we craft these pristine, bulletproof introductions.
It's exhausting.
It really is. But based on the psychology we've unpacked today, What if your most catastrophic failure, the exact thing you are most terrified of people finding out, is actually the precise story that holds the power to make your next presentation utterly unforgettable?
It is a terrifying but incredibly liberating thought. Go find your 11. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.